Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jorge-Tuto Quiroga, former president of Bolivia, Laura Chinchilla, vice president, World Leadership Alliance, Club de Madrid, and Mark Green, Woodrow Wilson Center.
Hello, everyone. As you just heard, I am Mark Green, president of the Woodrow Wilson Center, and today's session is entitled Latin America in the Face of Socioeconomic Crisis. And I think that's actually a good way of talking about it, because the last year has seen not one challenge, but a wave of challenges, a set of challenges affecting us in the Americas. There have been the public health challenges that come, of course, with the pandemic, economic fallout coming from the pandemic, but also, and perhaps more importantly, governing challenges coming out of the pandemic. Some have argued that authoritarians have taken the opportunity of the pandemic to expand their power. Others would say that really what the pandemic has done is shaken people's faith in democracy. We have a wonderful panel and two great guests to talk about the topic. So what I'd like to do is pose to you the question, how do you see the state of democracy from your vantage point? And Jorge, a former Woodrow Wilson scholar, I'll begin with you.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. The state of democracy here, 20 years after having signed the Democratic Charter of the OAS, is not what we would like it to be. You could say that 20 years ago, we only had one authoritarian, non-democratic regime, Cuba. Today, we have at least Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. But we cannot fault the Democratic Charter. It is in spite of the Democratic Charter that we have three openly authoritarian regimes and difficulties elsewhere. I would summarize the state of democracy the following way, Mark. We have three triplets. The first triplet are the three giant countries that seem somewhat detached and enmeshed in their own issues, US, Brazil, and Mexico. The second triplets are puppet regimes where the head of state is subjected to the political whims of a boss that is more powerful. Peru, my country, Bolivia, and probably Argentina, where you have in Peru Castillo, subjected to Mr. Cerrón and his Marxist agenda. Argentina, the president is Alberto Fernandez, but the power lies in the vice president, Doña Cristina Kirchner, and in my country, where Arce is nominally the president, but Evo Morales runs things. And then the last triplet, the three sleeping giants, these three puppets, and the last triplet is Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. Nicaragua probably needs the most focus everywhere because we are 6.5 weeks away from the coronation of a dictatorial dynasty. Imagine, if you will, North Korea, military beholden to Russia, economically influenced by China, where bloodlines determines who rules the country. That is about to happen right here in Nicaragua, smack in the middle of Central America, where Mr. Ortega is going to rule forever. He jails everyone. He disappears people that want to run against him. And the moment of truth is coming upon us now in Nicaragua. In the next panel, you'll see the legendary journalist from the Washington Post whose slogan goes, and I agree with that, democracy dies in the darkness. Let me tell you, in Nicaragua, democracy is going to die in broad daylight while we're watching, and no one seems to be doing what needs to be done to stop the coronation of this dictatorial dynasty in the next 6 weeks in the middle of Central America.
Laura, from your vantage point, do you see it the same way? Obviously, with respect to Nicaragua, in Costa Rica, you have felt the fallout as you've had a number of Nicaraguan migrants, refugees flee into Costa Rica. But do you see the state of democracy the same way?
Yes, absolutely. I will say that beyond this classification that Tuto made, I will say that in general terms, in more general terms, it is true that we do not wake up every day in Latin America counting new autocracies, although probably in 6 weeks we will have the new one, which is Nicaragua. But we wake up every day counting democracies of less quality. And that is in every possible index that we can read right now. I mean, Latin America has suffered of a very impressive deterioration in, for example, rule of law, human rights, respect for the basic civil liberties, the independence of powers, in the last probably six to 8 years. The Nicaragua case is in certain way a call for all Democrats in our region. It should ring all the alarms because, as Tuto also mentioned, it didn't happen from one day to another. It started almost 15 years ago. And the inter-American system fell short in bringing the right responses. So absolutely, I am very concerned about what is going to happen in Nicaragua and the repercussions that it will have in the rest of the democracies in our region.
So let me ask this, did COVID make it worse? Did COVID reveal it? Or is COVID an excuse that's being used? And what should we do about this? All three of us appear to be recovering democracy warriors. So what is it that we can do to try to address the slippage in democracy in the Americas?
Well, certainly COVID affected us all. I'd say the following. COVID provided the opportunity to put in place extraordinary measures that normally should have been crawled back. We're speaking about quarantines, people being locked down at homes and what have you. Nobody ever would think that Angela Merkel would use those measures to enthrone herself as a dictator. The danger comes in non-mature democracies where those extraordinary powers can be abused, and we've seen that. But here we are with the COVID. I think the priority right now ought to be BMW, not a B with Bolivia, but a V with victory, a BMW that needs to be put on the agenda vis-a-vis what we need to do as a region. The first, V, the vaccines. We are a few blocks away from the UN. The UN Security Council, to me, is the graveyard of issues that need to be addressed, whether it's Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela. There they go, and you never come out because Russia and China on the one side, US on the other side. Vaccines are the only issue in the planet where the veto-wielding members are vaccine-producing countries. So to me, it seemed like it would be easy to say, let's all get together and get the US vaccines, the Russia vaccines, the Sinovacs, the Sinopharms, the Chinese vaccines. And where do we get 20 billion vaccine doses equitably distributed? Because we have the issue now where in this country, in the US, you have third shots looking for arms or vaccines looking for people, and where we come from, people looking for vaccines. So where do we produce them? Do we break the patents? Do we give production rights? And how do we get all of us vaccinated in 2021-22? M is the money. The V, the vaccines, M is the money. US, Europe have injected extraordinary amounts of resources, call it bond buying, purchases, trillions. I wish I was the waiter in one of those meetings between the US Congress and the US President. I get my 2% tip on those trillions of dollars that flow around. We need to capitalize the Inter-American Development Bank, because if we do not have extraordinary injection of resources, we are going to pay the price. We have local currencies. We can't print money like the US. They call it quantitative easing, which sounds like a stomach ailment, but it's money printing. But you do not devalue the dollar against itself. We cannot do that in Costa Rica, in Bolivia, in Peru, and we need the Inter-American Development Bank to have heavy-duty resources to be able to inject into our parts of the world. And the last part of the BMW, the W of the wall, I'm not going to regurgitate my complaints about the walls and what have you, but there it is. All I would like is for the U.S. to look over the wall, because it seems many times, because of the distractions in Afghanistan and what have you, Mark, it's difficult for the U.S. to look over the wall at what's happening here. It seems that the only way you can knock on the door and get some attention is to get thousands of Haitians or Nicaraguans or Hondurans parked in the Rio Grande, and then you get some attention. How do we engage on energy, fighting for democracy, the Inter-American Democratic Charter? There's a Summit of the Americas next year, but we need a policy agenda, and it seems like the countries that can drive this agenda, looking at vaccines, looking at the money, looking at energy, looking at new integration, seem to be somewhat distracted. Again, going back to the point of the U.S., Brazil and Mexico, the natural leaders of the hemisphere, distracted in their own issues, and then in the meantime, democracy is eroding and we're not providing the right answers for the pandemic.
Laura, do you agree?
Yes, I would like to add that when you analyze how people have been feeling, have been felt about democracy in Latin America during the last 12 years, they are, every day are feeling more disenchanted with democracy. And so my concern is that the consequences of the pandemic is going to increase this kind of feeling, because we have to recognize that Latin America managed very badly the pandemic. When you look at any kind of indicator, if it is about the health indicators or social indicators or economic indicators, in every kind of indicators, Latin America is lagging behind the rest of the world. So it means that, for example, now that we have the new electoral cycle, which already started, probably what we will see is more people voting as an act of revenge against those that are, in government now. And that means something really bad, because people are not going to vote based on kind of rational, but more based on emotion. And we could end up with more kind of populist leaders, so the results could be even worse than the situation that we have today in terms of democracy.
So we've been talking about COVID. Let me introduce another challenge that we all see in the Americas, and that's human displacement. In the case of Venezuela, we have the largest mass migration event in the history of the Americas. And yet what's fascinating to me is that the global community really isn't paying attention. Other than the US, it's been dramatically underfunded, especially when you look at places like Syria and Sudan. So what are the impacts of migration that you're seeing, and what is it, again, that we can do to alert the world and make sure that there are adequate resources to not only meet people's immediate needs, but address some of the drivers of migration?
Excellent point, Mark. I think in migration, without delving too much into the domestic politics in the U.S., it used to be that in the old times, when you get asked, do you prefer a Democrat or Republican president? My answer would be, I'm from Bolivia, I don't vote, and don't vote in my country, I won't vote here, I won't pick sides here. But I always ask for a blender, because generally speaking, Democrats were tolerant to our people, not our products. They didn't like trade agreements. And Republicans were the reverse. They liked our products, but not our people. Now, lo and behold, it seems like we got the negative blender. We got a policy situation in the U.S. where our people are not welcome and our products seem to not be so welcome. So hopefully the U.S. can lead with policies that can be examples for other vis-a-vis migration and trade. You have the new agreement with Mexico. When we did the original NAFTA, it cascaded down to the Central America Free Trade, Peru, Chile, everybody else signed it. Hopefully we can do that, and hopefully work on this omnibus bill that's been done, something about migration, because the U.S. should provide a good example. And the point that you make, Mark, on Venezuela. Yeah, it is, Iván Duque was just here, good friend. Venezuelan refugees get a lot less help than other refugees. We're very close to the Syrian numbers from what's happening in Venezuela. And I would close on a very positive note. Iván Duque was here, he's a good friend. I would ask, look at what he's doing internationally. 3 things that will set precedents and examples for a very long time. Number 1, he denounced the ruthless tyrant, Nicolás Maduro, to the International Criminal Court of The Hague. It used to be in Latin America, we were all buddies. Don't be calling me things, I won't be calling you things. It's kind of uncomfortable, but Duque took Maduro to the International Criminal Court of The Hague, and let me tell you, that has him sleepless at nights. Number 2 thing he did, the temporary protection status for 1.8 million Venezuelans in a country the size of Colombia. If it was something like here, imagine doing a TPS for 12, 15 million people in the US, or much more than that in the Europe. Another good example of a good policy. And the last one, there was a disease going on around the area, the original Ortega sin, pretending that the right to re-election is a human right protected by the Inter-American Treaty and the Corte de San Jose, of the Inter-American Court. Imagine that oxymoron, truculent oxymoron. I have the human right to be re-elected forever. I have the human right to be a tyrant. Ortega did that. It was replicated in Honduras. They used it in my country. Duque again. Not only did he take Maduro to The Hague, not only did he legalize Venezuelan migrants, he demanded that the Inter-American Court speak about the re-election. And we got a ruling, Opinión Consultiva 2821, history making. It sounds very simple, but it's fundamental. Being a tyrant is not a human right protected by the Inter-American system. Those types of things in terms of dealing with migrants, in terms of not letting ruthless authoritarian people get away with murder, literally what Maduro does, and not have tyrants be ensconced in power pretending to have the human right to stay forever, are things that Colombia and Iván Duque has contributed, and he was here earlier, but it's only fair that we publicly pay homage and tribute to those types of good regional democratic behavior, and hopefully those good examples can cascade over to other countries, including the U.S.
Laura, quick word, we're running short on time, but any thoughts you'd like to add?
I just want to finish because I understand we have just 1 minute left. I just want to add a couple of additional ideas. First, the kind of migration that you have now coming from the Latin American countries is because of 3 reasons: political reasons, economic reasons, and climate change reasons. So that means that you have to put in place different kind of policies, more integral approaches to the problems that we have. And I am not sure if Washington is understanding this. And secondly, the United States has to play a role beyond mobilizing their own agency and try to convene the most important regional and international organizations that are working in Latin America. Only, they together could bring the kind of agenda and change that we are demanding right now.
Jorge, Laura, we are in the throes of agreement. Thanks for your insights. The Americas matter. This is one neighborhood. We have challenges and we have opportunities. Thanks so much to Concordia for really magnifying the challenges and opportunities in the Americas.
Thank you.
Thank you.